Hey guys, happy Friday morning. This next video is me jumping on a thread I saw from Mike at Hub Tunes, as well as Joe at Analog Archive, and I believe it was started by Craig at A to Z Vinyl Vault. The idea being to pick 2 decades, and showcase 4 albums of your choosing. The only stipulation is try to steer away from albums that you talk about quite a bit. Maybe focus on ones you don't talk about, don't see a lot of time, etc. So my submissions are from the 60s and 70s, and they're going to be all jazz. I know, shocker, but the 60s and 70s are actually one of my favorite times in music history for multiple reasons, and not just jazz. So it's easy for me to go to. The first pick of 4 is going to be from the 60s, and I'm going to start out with actually what's playing in the background, so I can't show you the actual vinyl, but it's a Hip Cakewalk, Don Patterson with Booker Irvin. This album came out in 1964. This particular pressing is a UK first pressing, which would have been about maybe a year or 2 years after the US pressing. Still on Prestige. It's actually the only non-US Prestige release that I have. It's got that typical fold-over art that you get from the European releases. It features Don Patterson on organ, Booker Irvin on tenor sax, Billy James on drums, and Leonard Houston on alto sax. Why I chose this one to start out with is this is actually an album that I discovered purely by chance earlier this year. eBay's been kind of my shopping area / battleground, depending on how you want to look at it, for music as of late. And I stumbled on a collector or dealer out of New York who was liquidating a bunch of jazz albums, and a lot of UK pressings were in there. And this one caught my attention purely from a couple different aspects. One, I do like Booker Irvin's work, but I've never seen this album cover before, so it instantly caught my attention. So it's like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot and see if I can get it. Picked it up for around $20. Was really shocked at actually how good this album was, and it's very organ based. If you listen to Jimmy Smith, Jimmy McGriff, that kind of thing, this goes right along with it. For me personally, my favorite track on it is Rosetta. It's got the whole album's very smooth, but it's got a nice blending of the various talent that's on the album, showcasing what they do. For me, I gotta be in the right mood to listen to organ-based albums, but this one has found a very special place in my collection, and honestly, it's only gotten maybe 2 plays since I've owned it, and I need to change that. But this is definitely one that I would recommend if you can find it. One thing about some of the earlier jazz albums is they may not be particularly valuable, but they, depending on what they are, they can be kind of hard to find. To give you an idea, this one generally ranges, I think, in the $40 to $60 range for the US pressing, depending on condition. But this is my first one. Just give me a second to put everything back together here. Oh, before I forget. This is Atlantic, or Transatlantic Prestige, which I believe is the European derivative of the Prestige label. The next one is actually one that I've owned for a very short amount of time, but it's the first album from one of my favorite jazz labels. Generally people gravitate towards Blue Note. For me, it's always been Prestige, mostly because I'm a John Coltrane fan, and there's so much other great talent on that label. But my next submission, I felt that it was important to start with the album that started it all as far as Impulse was concerned. It's a great Kai and JJ. This is a first pressing mono. It features Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, Tommy Williams, Roy Haynes, Art Taylor. You talk about a release that, being that this is their first one, they made this a star-studded album. I mean, all these guys are leaders in their own right. But to have all this fire on one particular release is just, you don't see that near as often. Obviously, got to show the beautiful gatefold with being an Impulse release. For me, this was kind of a sleeper album because I am a J.J. Johnson fan. But Kai Winding is one that I've only recently discovered, actually through collecting Verb label albums. And while it's not usually my deal, I've grown to actually really like his stuff. And for me, why I chose this album is, like I said, this is the first one on such an iconic label. It's just got an all-star cast, and it's one that I just don't see very often being mentioned on a lot of videos, and I felt that it was important to showcase this one. The amount of talent and just pure fire for an album. It's actually very easy. It's actually fairly easy to find and still very reasonable to acquire price-wise. So I had to take my time because I was looking for other stuff. But for me, I felt it was important to get the one that started it all. My favorite track on this one's actually it's number 5 on side 1. It's I don't know if you can see that. It's Alone Together. Like I said, I'm a JJ fan, and for me, this album is a great blending of different styles. Considering you would think with a cast like this that maybe the one player or two players might overpower everybody else, but it's a really nice blending of talent. No one really takes the reins away from anybody else. Everybody gets their just due. So this is one I would definitely recommend finding if you can find out in the wild or on eBay or etc. Kind of continuing the Impulse train on the 60s releases, just because, like I said, there's so much great stuff on Impulse. My next one is Salt and Pepper, Sunny Stitt, and Hologans of Oz. This is an amazing. Just like JJ, I'm a huge Sunny Stitt fan. I can't get enough of his stuff. And the thing about Sunny Stitt is that he was a workhorse. He's got so many albums and so many different labels, it's kind of hard to track them all down. But I'm working on it. Again, gotta show that gatefold. This one's in really nice shape. Picked this up from Slow Vinyl in New Mexico through one of their last online listings for a little while. This album was released in 1963 on Impulse, like I said. This is A52. This particular one is a stereo pressing. The title Salt and Pepper is actually well deserved because, depending obviously on who you follow, I would definitely say that Sunny Stitt's definitely the pepper part of this in more ways than one. I mean, because the man's playing is just pure. It's spicy. It's pure fire. And I don't know a lot about Paul's work, but he definitely seems to smooth out the other side, so, you know, hence salt and pepper. It's also backed up partially by Hank Jones, Milt Hinton, and Ozzie Johnson. Personally, my favorite track on this one is actually number 3, which is a theme from Lord of the Flies. This is another, like I said, this is another great release from Impulse. If you can find this one, definitely pick it up. It's one of those that, again, because, well, it fit a couple different needs. You know, one, I'm trying to collect as many Sonny Stitt albums as I can, and two, I'm also trying to collect as many Impulse titles, so this one actually checked both boxes, and it also checks the third box, which is no surprise that this album is just solid all the way around. So, again, if you can find this one, I highly recommend picking this one up. The last one for my 4 picks from the 60s is, surprise, surprise, another Impulse one. But kind of saved the best for last on this one. And no, it's not a Coltrane. That would be too easy. But close enough. Pharaohs Sanders Karma. This is an original pressing on Impulse, stereo pressing. This one was released around 1969. And really does feature Pharaohs Sanders at the height of his work, in my opinion. Kind of get that gatefold in there again. It features Pharaohs Sanders on tenor sax, Leon Thomas vocal and percussion, Lonnie Smith Jr. on piano, Frederick Watts on drums, Reggie Workman on bass, Ron Carter on bass, Julius Watkins French horn, and it was recorded in February 19th, 1969. What I love about this album, and I'm not a huge free jazz guy, but what I love about this album is, while it is very free jazz, it doesn't overpower. One of the things about Coltrane's work that I struggle with towards the last couple years of his life is after Love Supreme, Crescent, etc., he went into sort of the free jazz stuff, which is, it's hard for me to sit down and listen to. I mean, I get it, free jazz is free jazz. I mean, free jazz means it's free expression, but it's hard to sit down and just kind of sit down and enjoy it at times. Whereas with this album, it's got a nice, that's what I'm looking for. It's nice and even through the whole album. It doesn't like go into one direction or the other. And this is one that actually has gained a lot of popularity in recent years, and it's actually one that gets searched out by a lot of jazz collectors. I was actually very lucky to pick this one up. I got this through a trade through someone on Instagram, and I've only put it on through a few times since I've owned it. Again, just for lack of time and collection constantly expanding, etc. But for me, if I had to pick a single track that sticks out on this album for me, it's probably The Creator's Master Plan, which is, I believe, the opening track. And it's just the name Karma is very appropriate, because there's definitely some Eastern influences and stuff like that, and it just puts your mind in a very peaceful place. So this is one that I was really, really happy to get. I mean, I would have settled for a reissue, but I was very lucky to get an original. So that rounds out the 60s part of this video. And now we get into the 70s. And surprise, surprise, and the Impulse years goes into the 70s as well. Now, before I show you the next one, regarding what I said about free jazz, I'm not saying I can't tolerate all free jazz. like I said, there's some albums I can take, there's some I can't. But I still appreciate their place in history. And my next choice to start out the 70s is somebody that's next to Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders and one or two others, is known through a lot of his later career as being a big free jazz guy. Barnett Coleman Crisis. This was recorded in 1972. Recorded in concert at New York University, March 22nd, 1969. I would consider it counting as a 70s release because while it was recorded in 69, it wasn't released until early 70s. So I might be fudging it, but it is what it is, right? It features Ornette Coleman, Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, Charlie O'Haden, and Ornette D. Coleman backing him up. The first thing that attracted me to this album was the cover. I'm a sucker for interesting cover art. And when I first saw this album, I was like, I don't care what the album sounds like, I gotta buy this from the album jacket. But being on impulse, I mean, you gotta be pretty talented to be on impulse. So, it didn't surprise me that that this album was good. Now, let's see if I can read you some a bit from this. The thing about this album is, and that's actually referenced here, is that the music itself is, like I said, it's very it's definitely in the free jazz category. So there are those in the jazz community that really liked it, and there are some that really didn't like it, and there's very few in betweens. This also is a snapshot for its time in history, because you're right at the tail end of the late 60s, early 70s. The war in Vietnam was still raging, race tensions, economic injustice, etc., etc. Was still very rampant in this country. Not to get off on a political tangent, but and I believe that this album actually really kind of showcases where a lot of people's minds were. I mean, the front cover, I mean, it says it all. But this is definitely one that, even if the political stuff doesn't grab you, if you find this one at a reasonable price, pick it up and give it a listen. It's definitely a very interesting album, especially for the fact that, well, it's Ornette at his absolute best. It's I mean, it's a whole band at their best. But it's also a great snapshot in time, and it also says a lot for how nice it sounds, being that it was recorded live, because live concerts can also sound, they can either sound really good or really bad, and this one sounds really, really awesome. So again, definitely recommend picking this one up if you can find it. The next one is a final one on my little impulse group. Again, to circle back, it's hard to pick other labels because there's so many great albums and so many great artists on this label. But the last one is Pharoah Sanders, Village of the Pharaohs. This was recorded in 1973. It's a white label promo. It also features vocalist Cedarius Brown. Also features Arthur Webb, Joe Bonner, Cecil McBee, Stanley Clark, Calvin Hill, Norman Connors, Jimmy Hops, Lawrence Killian, Kenneth Nash, and Marvin Peterson, and Kylo. It says here at the bottom, this album was mixed for compatible stereo and quadraphonic reproduction by means of the standard matrix system, which I don't know if that's a bunch of extra jargon or whatever, but maybe you audiophile guys can help me out there. Again, really cool gatefold. Unfortunately, not glossy. They went to a more of a matte jacket in the 70s. Probably save costs a little bit. what I love about this album is it's got more of a again, it continues on with the whole spiritual thing, but it definitely showcases where his mind was at. The first couple tracks, I mean, the album just takes you to, it actually takes you to, you know, Egypt, etc., and kind of really puts your mind in that specific place and time. And again, free jazz, but it's very um, spotlighted on one area. It's not all over the place. And this is definitely another one that I would highly recommend if you're looking for albums from Pharaohs to look up. It's an acquired taste, but me personally, I love it, and really happy to have this one. The final two are on the CTI label. I've talked about CTI before. CTI is a budget label that came out in the 70s. Featured a lot of amazing talent from the genre. And the quality never suffered on the albums. So you can actually pick these albums up for, you know, pennies on dollar compared to like a Blue Note or Prestige or Impulse or, you know, whatever. My next pick is Kenny Burrell, God Bless the Child, on CTI. Another thing I love about it, they actually continued with what Impulse did with their gatefolds. The jacket itself is kind of the cover art's kind of interesting because you would look at that and think, oh, it's going to be really down and depressing. It's actually not. Literally, if there's anything kind of down on the album, it's literally in the first 10 to 15 seconds. After that, I mean, Kenny goes right into what he's known for, and features backing him up. It features, like I said, Kenny Burrell leading on guitar, bass Ron Carter, drums Billy Cobham, trumpet Freddie Hubbard, and flute Hubert Laws. That's another thing I love about CTI is that with these albums, a lot of times you'll have major artists backing these guys up. So there's a lot of times where you'll have, say, Kenny Burrell and Freddie Hubbard backing somebody else up on their album and vice versa. If I had to guess on a single track that I would recommend starting out with, it would probably be the first one, which is Be Yourself. It's a great opening track. This album I actually found in Colorado Springs on my most recent trip earlier this year. Picked this up for under $10. It's a really awesome album, and actually it was mastered by the legend himself, Rudy Van Gelder, and anything the man touches turns to gold in my opinion, sound-wise. You really can't get much better than that. This is definitely one, if you find this in a shop for cheap, grab it. You will not be disappointed. Basically anything on CTI, I would recommend that. But this is number 3. And rounding out the final one for the 70s is actually one of my personal favorite artists, but it's hard to pick one just from him alone. And I nearly went with him for the 60s, but I decided to stick with the 70s. Stanley Tureen, Don't Mess with Mr. T. Again, CTI. This was released in 1973. Again, awesome gatefold. Look at that image. That's just awesome. Features obviously Stanley Turrentine. Drums Idris Muhammad, percussion Rubens Bassini, bass Ron Carter, guitar Eric Gale, trumpet / flugelhorn Randy Breeker and John Frost, bass trombone Alan Ralph, saxophone Pepper Adams, baritone Jerry Dodgen, alto Joe Farrell tenor, violin Harry Seichman, Harry Glickman, Emmanuel Green, Harold Cohen, Guy Lamia, David Nadine, Joe Panula, sorry if I butchered that, Irving Spice, Viola Harold Coletta, Emmanuel Vardini, Cello Samor Barab, and George Reese. And this one, it was actually not done by Rudy Van Gelder. This album, the reason why I chose this one is, again, it really showcases Turrentine at a really great point in his musical career. Everything he was putting out on this label was great. And this one for me, I can't really, it's hard to recommend a specific track on here, but if I had to go with one, probably Two for Tea. But again, it's hard to pick just one track because this whole album is fire. But what I love about this particular album over a lot of his other ones is it's just the amount of different artists that are on here that are showcasing their talent, and none of them overpower each other in any way, shape, or form. And what you have is basically you stick all these elements into the pot, and what comes out is an absolute masterpiece. And it's really a shame that CTI is not as well known as, say, Impulse, Prestige, Blue Note, Jazzland, etc. You can usually find these particular albums for under $10. Like I said, same with the Kenny Burrell. If you guys find these in your local shops, definitely pick them up if you don't have them. I guarantee you will like them. And what draws me to the 70s stuff, especially the late 60s and the 70s, is you start getting into a lot more funk added into the albums. They start getting away from traditional jazz, the hard bop, and started adding more, a little bit of blues in there, sort of the early elements of funk, that kind of thing, and really adds a whole new dynamic to the music. So this is my final pick for the decade of the 70s. I hope you enjoyed my picks. If you like what you saw, please click like and subscribe. It's a pleasure sharing these albums with you. It was a pleasure sharing this experience with you. It's a pleasure talking with you. You guys have a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are, and I'll talk to you again soon.